when we got connected with the brethren in Germany, the first brother that got convicted of the message, first time we went to Germany, prophecy school, very few people come under conviction of that message. Partially because the main person that they really had great confidence in there, I kind of got direct from the pulpit about their message not being present truth, but all it was truth, so I had eliminated a bunch of the Germans. I still stand by that position. But there was one brother that came under conviction, and we began working with him, and he had what I understood to be at that time, probably still understand to be a misguided idea that this message needs to go to the leadership of Adventism. So for the next few years, he was arranging meetings with conference presidents in Germany, and we finally had a meeting with conference leadership and university professors, and I think it's the only meeting that I quit on. Those German theologians, one of them turned over and got rude with my wife, and I said, "Well, that's it. I'm not here," because they're already on that field anyway. But what she was smiling about is my wife smiled at this pastor's presentation, and it's one of these smiles. You're not smiling because you're laughing. It's like it was an amazement smile that this guy would actually try to use this quote the way that he was trying to use it. And she gets this look, and this other pastor who was sitting next to us, he turns to her and he goes after her about why she thought that was funny, and I said, "That's enough. We're out of here." But the passage he was using was a passage that prior to that time period I had no idea about. And how I learned about that passage was I went to back-to-back camp meetings. One was in Austria, and the next was in Switzerland. And in Austria, there was a camp meeting. A lot of people there. It's probably 100 people. But there was one guy there that I could just tell you. Because sometimes you just know people are fanatical, and you only have so much time. So you prioritize who you're going to spend your time with. I wasn't going to spend any time with this guy. He's just, he's one has all his own agenda. It wasn't what we were there for. And he comes up with this quote from me, and he says, "How do you explain this one?" And I wouldn't give him the time to get it. I just wouldn't. And then we went to Switzerland, and we're having a camp meeting there with another fair number of people, and there was a really nice guy there, really, humble, dignified Seventh-day Adventist Christian, and he has to come up with the same quote, and he's not putting it in my face. He said, "How do you understand it?" I said, "Well, I guess I better go look it up." Okay. And what I came to understand is that there's a quote that when it got translated into German, it was translated wrong. So the Germans, they speak German in Austria and Switzerland and Germany. Those people in German-speaking Europe were using this quote to identify that the Millerites were wrong on their understanding of the seven trumpets. And this quote came from William Foy. And when they translated William Foy's quote into German, they translated where it says, "I was shown that the sixth trumpet has not yet sounded." That's not what William Foy says. William Foy had a vision, and he had it recorded at what do they call those? When you go get something legally notarized. He went down and had this vision notarized in 1842. Why did he do that? It was for the providence of God. And in it, he says, "I was shown that the sixth trumpet has not yet done sounding." It's kind of awkward English, but what it means is in 1842, he was shown that the sixth trumpet was still sounding. And when they translated it into German, they said in 1842, William Foy said, "The sixth trumpet has not yet sounded." Okay, the Millerites understood that the sixth trumpet quit sounding in 1840. And I had come to an understanding when I began to grapple with Islam after 9/11 that the Millerites were wrong, that the sixth trumpet didn't quit sounding until 1844 when the seventh trumpet began to arrived, and I was taking flack for that. Why are you opposing the pioneers? The pioneers say the sixth trumpet ended in 1840, and you're saying it ends in 1844, and you're supposedly sympathetic with the pioneers. And I had my reasons, and I would explain them based upon a triple application of prophecy. But then in these meetings in Austria and Switzerland, I realized William Foy in 1842 says the sixth trumpet's still sounding. Therefore, now I got William Foy. This proves my point. It was good for me. So that's how I was looking at it. And at that point, I really hadn't wrapped my mind around the fact that the pioneers all understood that William Foy and Hazen Foss had been given the genuine gift of the spirit of prophecy. I would venture to say that most Seventh-day Adventists probably don't even know who those names are. And if they do, they probably do not realize that the pioneers understood that the inspired gift of the spirit of prophecy that was given to Ellen White was first given to Hazen Foss and William Foy. They probably are unaware of that. But my point is early on, the Lord led me to consider the inspired relevance of William Foy, and it became an important point because it was in the time period when we're arguing about 9/11 being the arrival of the third woe, the role of Islam. This was a battle, okay? So this passage is contributing to that battle. Here you've got William Foy saying that the pioneers were incorrect on 1840 and that what we're saying about 1844 is valid. So it becomes an argument that's important, okay, in the development of this message. So when it came to the 144,000 there in your notes, if you go back there where it says literal or symbolic, through the years, I would go to this when the argument would come up or a discussion would come up in these kind of meetings. Or do you believe the 144,000 is literal? Do you believe it's symbolic? And I'd say, well, Sister White says the living saints, 144,000 in number. I don't know how you get around that in the English, that it's in number. But then in Italy, we realized in the same vision that William Foy had, where he was saying that the sixth trumpet has not yet done sounding, that he had some commentary on the 144,000, and he's saying just the opposite of Sister White. Okay, so let's read these. The first paragraph from this is the one I was referring to. It says, this is a vision that William Foy received and recorded. A snippet of it. But 3 steps remain for him to take. Against his breast and across his left hand was, as it were, a trumpet of pure silver, and a great and terrible voice came from the midst of the boundless place, saying, the sixth angel hath not yet done sounding. Okay, and he recorded this in 1842. Pioneers thought the sixth trumpet ended in 1840. William Foy, with the gift of the spirit of prophecy, says it's not done yet sounding here in 1842. Okay, but also in this same vision, he's going to use the word not in number, but innumerable. Okay. I then saw in the midst of the place an innumerable multitude arrayed in white and standing in a perfect square, having crowns of unfading glory upon their heads. They were of the size of children 10 years of age, and they sung a song which the saints and angels could not sing. So if you're familiar with Sister White's commentary on the 144,000, she sees them on the sea of glass in a perfect square, and we've already read the comments that they have a song that only they can sing. So here, he's saying they were an innumerable multitude. And Ellen White says, in number. And I think those are contradictory thoughts, are they not? So now you're stuck with I'm stuck with it. I'm stuck with the idea that I've already concluded that, yeah, I can place my confidence in the inspiration of William Foy. And I have confidence in 1 Corinthians 14:32. The spirits of the prophets are subject unto the prophets. They don't disagree with one another. Okay, let's read on a little bit more of William Foy. Pardon me? I then beheld an innumerable multitude arrayed in white, with cards upon their breasts, and unto each was given a crown of brightness. The guides spake, saying, these are they which have passed through death, So there's also an innumerable group of people that have died. There was arrayed before me in the spirit an innumerable multitude which had not passed through death. Who is it that doesn't pass through death? And they're innumerable by this prophet's evaluation. Their crowns were like the brightness of the stars, and their right hands they held cards. I then saw an individual which passed through death. Her brightness was beyond expression of mortals, and at her right side stood a guardian angel. The angel's raiment was like pure gold, and his wings like flaming fire. And as she passed me, she cried with a lovely voice, I'm going to the gate to meet my friends. And the angel then appeared flying through the midst of this boundless place and came to the spirit of one of those that had not passed through death and cried with a loud voice, saying, This is my mother. Okay, so these are familiar things that Sister White talks about, the reunification that takes place. But there's been a distinction to be made between those that die and those that don't die with William Foy. But William Foy is calling the 144,000 innumerable, and Ellen White says in number. Okay, so when I would be in this question and answer period through the years, where I would go to is that Sister White says in number, so I go with literal, but I'm not threatened by symbolic, and then I would present this next quote, this next study. And this study is derived from a Adventist pastor called Louis Weir. You can find this in his book, The Certainty of the Third Angel, where he goes through the genealogy and Genesis from Adam to Noah. And he shows that the genealogy in Genesis, if you take the definitions of the names and turn them into a run-on sentence, they describe the gospel perfectly. Then he jumps forward to the genealogy of the 144,000 in Revelation 7. He takes those tribes' names and he puts the definitions of those names out to the side, and then he does a run-on sentence. Okay, so I have that part illustrated for you here. You can see the 12 tribes in order from Revelation 7 in your notes under symbolic, and then you can see the definitions of those names, and then below is the run-on sentence that is created by taking these definitions. And I'm saying that these names of the 144,000 at that level, what their names mean, they symbolize the experience of the 144,000. Therefore, at that level, the 144,000 is symbolic. Okay, so here's the run-on sentence based upon the definition of the names. God will be celebrated and praised by the 144,000 as they behold the sun and press together in honesty. They will wrestle in prayer with God, who will forget their sins, and they will be joined in unity and receive the reward of the Holy Spirit living within their habitation while exalting Christ as they are added to the redeemed and set down with Christ at God's right hand. And you can go see that run-on sentence is created from the definition of the names of the 144,000 in order, and therefore 144,000 in number. For me, I'd say, well, Sister White, that sounds literal, but we know it's symbolic. But she also tells us this isn't a subject we're supposed to be arguing about. Anyway, so I've tried to dead end that subject. Okay, so literal, in Revelation, one of the arguments for literal, the 144,000 being literal, is in Revelation 7, verse 4. And we won't spend much time here on this, but we will move through it. In verse 4 it says, And I heard the number of them that were sealed. And there were sealed 144,000 of all the tribes of the children of Israel. So John hears the number of the 144,000. That sounds literal. But if you go to verse 9, now you have the great multitude, and it says, And this I beheld, and lo, a great multitude, which no man could number. So the great multitude, John's told no one can number them. I'd say that's innumerable. But in verse 4, the 144,000 is in number. So in Revelation 7, you can see sort of a justification. It's one of the pieces of information people use that are going to emphasize that the 144,000 is literal. Just to bring you back up to what I'm suggesting here. I'm suggesting that there's kind of a dichotomy is probably the wrong word. Is it? Yeah, okay, dichotomy. Then you got one prophet that seems to be saying it's literal, and one prophet, William Foy, saying, no, it must be symbolic. It's not a literal number, it's an innumerable number. Okay, so let's read on and add a little bit more thought to that. Symbolic. And you can pull out several places where Sister White says Elijah is a symbol of the 144,000. This is one of them. So Elijah was a type of the saints who will be living on the earth at the time of the second advent of Christ, and who will be changed in a moment, in the twinkling of the eye, at the last trump, without tasting of death. So who's Elijah a symbol of? A group that do not taste death, right? It was as a representative of those who shall be thus translated that Elijah, near the close of Christ's earthly ministry, was permitted to stand with Moses by the side of the Savior on the Mount of Transfiguration. In these glorified ones, the disciples saw in miniature, a representation of the kingdom of the redeemed. They beheld Jesus clothed with the light of heaven. They heard the voice out of the cloud, acknowledging him as the Son of God. They saw Moses representing those who will be raised from the dead at the time of the second advent. And there also stood Elijah representing those who at the close of earth's history will be changed from mortal to immortal and be translated to heaven without seeing death. So Elijah represents 144,000. Moses, those redeemed that go through death.
So is 144,000 a name for the innumerable?
For the what?
The innumerable multitude of the 144,000 is the name instead of.
Perhaps. I'm doing what attorneys say you should never do. You should never raise a question you don't have an answer for. I'm going to raise a question the second time I did it today that I won't have an answer for, but I want to put the question in place to make another point. I'm not sure that I can explain why these two prophets seem to be saying two different things. But here, when she's talking about Elijah, she says that it represents a group of people that don't die at the end of the world. You follow me? So Elijah symbolizes 144,000. Everyone on that? Okay, but Elijah also symbolizes not a group of people, but a single person. Okay, next quote. The Jews tried to stop the proclamation of the message that had been predicted in the Word of God, but prophecy must be fulfilled. The Lord says, behold, I will send you Elijah, the prophet, before the coming of the great and dreadful day of the Lord. Somebody, what's that? Singular. It's not a group of people. Somebody is to come in the spirit of power of Elijah, and when he appears, singular, probably could argue it's not a girl. When he appears, men may say, you are too earnest. You do not interpret the scriptures in the proper way. Let me tell you how to teach your message. So Elijah is both representing a single messenger at the end of the world, and at the same time, a group of people. And at the level that we understand here, the group of people that he represents may be innumerable. But the single guy is one guy. It's innumerable. Yes.
Because they're all one.
Mm-hmm. So you're.
Well, I know. But
Okay, well, maybe, but I'm not there yet. Okay, so next quote. I'm just putting some of these thoughts in place. Now, pardon me? Give the reference for people who are watching. The last quote was Selected Messages, Book 2, page 412. And the one before that is Prophets and Kings, page 227. And the next one is from Selected Messages, Book 1, page 174. Christ says that there will be those in the church who present fables and suppositions when God has given grand, elevating, ennobling truths which should ever be kept in the treasure house of the mind. When men pick up this theory and that theory, when they are curious to know something it is not necessary for them to know, God is not leading them. It is not his plan that his people should present something which they have to suppose, which is not taught in the word. It is not his will that they shall get into controversies over questions which will not help them spiritually, such as, who is to compose the 144,000? This those who are the elect of God will in a short time know without question. When the argument would come up in our meetings about who was among the 144,000, there sometimes were people that were just convinced it was a literal number, period. And if you disagree with me, we're going to have an argument. And then there was people on the other side of the issue, symbolic, and if you disagree with me, we're going to have an argument. And I've tried to stay out of it based upon this. Just as, but what I understood, and this is the part I want you to see, is when I would use this quote, I would throw this quote into that discussion. My implications were, is that soon enough, we're going to know whether the 144,000 is literal or not. I don't think that's what it's saying. It's saying there comes a point in time when we will know who the 144,000 are. And because we think we have two choices about what that means, that the 144,000 are literal or they're symbolic, that's the only answers that we can see. And I'm understanding now that when it says soon enough we will know who the 144,000 are, it's saying that soon enough we're going to know that the 144,000 are the priests. Totally different subjects, not about literal or symbolic. It's about recognizing who the priests are, and the priests are the 144,000. Okay, so this is fulfilled not about literal and symbolic. It's about self-awareness. And I'm saying that on purpose. The 144,000, the priests, they're going to have to know who they are. You have to know that you've been called to be a priest and what the demands upon the priests are. You're going to have to understand that you individually have been called to be a priest. So it's soon enough you will know. And we could not know until the Lion of the tribe of Judah took us back to Ezra 7:9, and we began to see fractals and began to see that on the first day of the first month in our history at 9/11, that the Lord is bringing people out of Babylon, out of Laodicea, to build the temple, to reestablish to finish the work of raising up the temple, such as Ezra is illustrating. Before we got to that point, we weren't seeing a distinction between priests, Levites, and Nethinims. Once you're at that point, you begin to see, hey, well, the people that are called on 9/11, they're called to be priests. So what does that mean? And I'm saying one of the things it means is that you have to understand what this high calling is. Because in the story of the priests, when the priests are being sanctified for these 7 days and they're beginning their service right here on day 8, what's the next thing that happens? There's a couple sons of Aaron that had their discernment corrupted because of the use of alcohol, and they could not make a distinction between the precious and the vile, and they use unholy fire, and they're struck dead. But you have to know who you are. You have to know who you are, and you have to have the ability to separate the precious from the vile. Okay. So now some of the thoughts about the 144,000, and then we'll move away from this, perhaps. But one of the issues is about the sealing. Okay, so that's where we're heading. Singled out. Let me read Revelation 14:1-3 quoted. Why were the 144,000 so specially singled out? Because they had to stand with the wonderful truth right before the whole world and receive their opposition. And while receiving this opposition, they were to remember that they were the sons and daughters of God. that they must have Christ formed within the hope of glory. They were ever keeping in view the great blessed hope that is before them. What is this? It is an eternal weight of glory. So what I want us to see is the reason the 144,000 are singled out is, number one, they have the experience of the incarnation, Christ formed within. And that's the story of these three histories. Is that in this history, they were required to obediently and correctly feed upon the manna. In this history, they were to eat the flesh and drink the blood of the bread of heaven. In this history, they were to eat those messages in the angel's hands. These messages in the angel's hands, the bread of heaven, the manna, are symbols of divinity. In each of these histories, those that enter into the actual covenant experience with the Lord are those that have brought divinity into their humanity, because you are what you eat. Therefore, if you're not understanding that this is where it begins, then you're destroying your ability to receive the divinity into the humanity that you must have in this history. That's part of why they are singled out. But the other part is because they're going to give a message that's going to receive opposition all the way to the end. So what is the message that they're given? It's the message they're given right here. Because when they're given that message, this hidden manna, they're to take that message to the Adventist church. And as the Adventist church closes its probation, they continue to carry that message. But the message they got to give is this message here. It's the hidden manna. It's the little book. It's the bread of heaven. It's the message that gives it work that we must do. But the work is only effective if we bring that message into our experience. So, the sealing. Switching gears a little bit here. Pardon me? Reference. That was Selected Messages, Book 1, page 1. The first one, 174. The last one was Sermons and Talks, page 72. About why are the 144 singled out. The next one is from Testimonies to Ministers, 445. It says, the sealing of the servants of God is the same that was shown to Ezekiel in vision. So the sealing of Revelation 7 is the same as Ezekiel 9. And I would challenge you to read the rest of that paragraph, because it's in the rest of that paragraph where you can see that Islam is brought into it, if you understand Luke 21. All right, but we're not going there. But we'll go there. Continuing on with that quote. John also had been witness of this most startling revelation. He saw the sea and the waves roaring, and men's heart failing them for fear. That's Luke 21. This is a passage identifying Islam. And Islam arrives back in prophetic history at 9/11. And this is where the sealing of the 144,000 begins, and this is the sealing of Revelation 7. This is the sealing of Ezekiel 9. Next quote from Early Writings, page 118. I then saw the third angel, said my accompanying angel, fearful is his work, awful is his mission. He is the angel that is to select the wheat from the tares. And, that word and, what does that word and tell you? Also, in addition to. Okay, so he's got at least two words there. He's first going to select the wheat and tares, but, and seal or bind the wheat for the heavenly garner. These things should engross the whole mind, the whole attention. So the third angel has a minimum of two-step work. He's got to select the wheat and tares, and then he's going to seal and bind. All right? That was Early Writings 118. This is Early Writings 58. Trying to show that the sealing is a period of time. Whereas at one level, the sealing is a point in time. So this is the period of time. My dear brethren and sisters, let the commandments of God and the testimony of Jesus Christ be in your minds continually, and let them crowd out worldly thoughts and cares. When you lie down and when you rise up, let them be your meditation. Live and act holy in reference to the coming of the Son of Man. The sealing time is very short and will soon be over. So the sealing time is a period of time. Now is the time while the four angels are holding the four winds to make your calling and election sure. So the sealing time is the period of time when the four winds are being restrained. It's short, but I'm just wanting us to see here that at one level the sealing is a period of time. Next quote is from Testimonies, Volume 3, page 266 and 267. And remember, Sister White has just informed us that the sealing of Revelation 7 is the same as the sealing of Ezekiel 9. And what I'm wanting us to see here is that one of the characteristics that Sister White's going to highlight in the context of Ezekiel 9 is those that are the 144,000 that received the seal of God. Their sensitivity to sin is something that is especially emphasized. Okay. The prejudice which has arisen against us because we have reproved wrongs that God has shown me existed, and the cry that has been raised of harshness and severity are unjust. God bids us speak, and we will not be silent. If wrongs are apparent among God's people, and if the servants of God pass on indifferent to them, they virtually sustain and justify the sinner, and are alike guilty and will just as surely receive the displeasure of God, for they will be made responsible for the sins of the guilty. In vision, I've been pointed to many instances where the displeasure of God has been incurred by a neglect on the part of his servants to deal with the wrongs and sins existing among them. Those who have excused these wrongs have been thought by the people to be very amiable and lovely in disposition, simply because they shunned to discharge a plain scriptural duty. The task was not agreeable to their feelings, therefore they avoided it. So you can see it's about the responsibility to deal with sin. Continuing on, the spirit of hatred. It's those people that don't like this type of work, they manifest a spirit of not just displeasure, a spirit of hatred. Okay? The spirit of hatred, which has existed with some because of the wrongs among God's people, have been reproved because the wrongs among God's people have been reproved, has brought blindness and fearful deception upon their souls. If you start opposing the work of correcting the sin in the camp, not only are you going to manifest the spirit of hatred, but you're going to go blind and deception, making it impossible for them to do what? Discriminate between right and wrong. Who can't discriminate between right and wrong in the scenario of the cleansing and then consecration of the priest? Nadab and Abihu, okay? They went through this history literally drinking alcohol, which shut down their ability to see right and wrong. But they're typifying our history when there's priests, people that have been called to be priests, they go through here, they can't distinguish between right and wrong. And what prevents them from doing it is they're opposed to the work of identifying sins in the camp. You see that? Okay, that's what shuts it down. They don't realize, they don't accept that as part of their work, or your work, because you're a priest. There's 144,000 that are going to receive the seal that's illustrated in Ezekiel 9. So continuing on, they have put out their own spiritual eyesight. They may witness wrongs, but they do not feel as Joshua and humble themselves because the dangers of souls is felt by them. The true people of God, who have the spirit and work of the Lord and the salvation of souls at heart, will ever view sin in its real sinful character. They will always be on the side of faithful and plain dealing with sins which easily beset the people of God. especially in the closing work for the church in the sealing time of the 144,000. So this is bringing it in to Ezekiel 9, the sealing of the 144,000, and the characteristic that's represented in Ezekiel 9 by the sign and crying is that these people that are receiving the seal, they not only distinguish between right and wrong, they deal with the wrong. They respond to it. They don't pass by. So, continuing on, especially in the closing work for the church in the sealing time of the 144,000 who are to stand without fault before the throne of God, will they feel most deeply the wrongs of God's professed people. This is forcibly set forth in the prophet's illustration of the last work under the figure of the men, each having a slaughter weapon in his hand. One man among them was clothed with linen, with a writer's inkhorn by his side. And the Lord said unto him, Go through the midst of the city, through the midst of Jerusalem, and set a mark on the forehead of the men that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the land thereof, in the midst thereof. What's he doing? Okay, the man with the writer's inkhorn, he's going through Jerusalem in Ezekiel 9. And in the context of this passage, he's putting a seal upon those that sigh and cry. But in the context of this passage, he's putting a seal upon those that are sensitive to the sins in the camps that are addressing the sin in the camp, right? And you follow that? And these people that are receiving the seal are the 144,000, it says. This is the sealing time of the 144,000. So as he goes through, he's got two classes of people. One class of people are sensitive to the sins and are dealing with it, and the other class, they're blind because they resisted this work. So who's the class that are blind? Pardon me? Laodicea. I'm looking for a different word. Who's the class that's blind? Foolish virgins. I'm looking for a different word. Foolish priests. I'm looking for another word. You're all right. Looking for tares. Okay, does that work? And the ones that are receiving the seal, who are they? The weak. So who is this angel that's going through? Pardon me? It's the third angel, because he's the one that is to select the wheat and tares. And also he's going to what? He's going to bind the wheat for the heavenly garner. He's also going to bind the tares for the fires of destruction. Okay, so this is an illustration of a work that takes place when? In this history here, the sealing time of the 144,000. Okay, continuing on. Who are standing in the council of God at this time? Is it those who virtually excuse wrongs among the professed people of God and who murmur in their hearts, if not openly, against those who would reprove sin? Is it those who take their stand against them and sympathize with those who commit wrong? No, indeed, unless they repent and leave the work of Satan in oppressing those who have the burden of the work and in holding up the hands of sinners in Zion, they will never receive the mark of God's sealing approval. They will fall in the general destruction of the wicked, represented by the work of the 5 men bearing slaughter weapons. Mark this point with care. Those who receive the pure mark of truth, wrought in them by the power of the Holy Spirit, represented by a mark by the man in linen, are those that sigh and cry for all the abominations that be done in the church. Their love for purity and honor and glory of God is such, and they have so clear a view of the exceeding sinfulness of sin, that they are represented as being in agony, even sighing and crying. Read the 9th chapter of Ezekiel. So is this talking about this movement, or is this talking about the Adventist church? We're grappling with this movement, aren't we? We're grappling with the wise and foolish priests in here. And evidently from this passage, if we plug it in here, the wise priests are the ones that are faithfully dealing with the sin in the camp in this history, and the foolish priests are the ones that are resisting it. this line up here of Laodicean Adventism, we're not being confronted with those sins, are we? Because you're going to have this, how should you say it? Mark this point with care.
So clear of view.
They have so clear a view of sin, of the exceeding sinfulness of sin, that they're represented as being in agony. Are we dealing with the sins of the Adventist Church, or are we dealing with the sins of this movement? Both. Because right here, what's opened up right here? The 4 generations of Adventism. This is the final generation. And to understand the testing process that the wise and foolish priests are going to go through, you're going to have to realize that we get tested by the sins of our fathers that's taking place in these generations here. We become familiar with the sins of our fathers and the exceeding sinfulness of those sins. And it's also repeated here. I'm just making a brief point that it's both. If you can see it. That was, I already put that in the record. Judgment of the Living. Manuscript Releases, Volume 9, page 194.
137.
137. Volume 9, 137. The onlookers may discern no difference, but there is one who said that the tares were not to be plucked up by human hands, lest the wheat be rooted up also. Let both grow together until the harvest. The Lord sends forth his reapers to gather out the tares and binds them into bundles to burn, while the wheat is gathered into the heavenly garner. The time of judgment is the most solemn period, when the Lord gathers his own from among the tares. Those who have been members of the same family are separated. A mark is placed upon the righteous. They shall be mine, saith the Lord of hosts, in the day when I make up my jewels, and I will spare them as a man spareth his own son that serveth him. Those who have been obedient to God's commandments will unite with the company of the saints in light. They shall enter in through the gates into the city and have right to the tree of life. The one shall be taken, his name stand in the book of life, while those with whom he associated shall have the mark of eternal separation from God. The tares and wheat are now commingled, but then the one hand that alone can separate them will give to everyone his true position. I'm saying the time of judgment is here. 9/11, judgment of the living begins, the sealing of the 144,000. He's making up his jewels in this time period. Next quote from Bible Training School, December 1st, 1903. Familiar quote in this message. The work of the Holy Spirit is to convince the world of sin, of righteousness, and of judgment. The world can only be warned by seeing those who believe the truth sanctified through the truth, acting upon high and holy principles, showing in a high, elevated sense the line of demarcation between those who keep the commandments of God and those who trample them under their feet. The sanctification of the Spirit signalizes the difference between those who have the seal of God and those who keep the spurious rest day. When the test comes, it will be clearly shown what the mark of the beast is. It is the keeping of Sunday. Those who, after having heard the truth, continue to regard this day as holy bear the signature of the man of sin who fought to change times and laws. And what I want you to see in here, and I'll try to tie this sealing thought together as we get further down here, is that we now know, we used to use this just simply as the ensign. At the Sunday law, there's an ensign lifted up, and that ensign has to be people that have already received the seal of God, because the world can only be warned when they see people that have the seal of God during the Sunday law crisis. But we now understand that this ensign is progressively lifted up, and that it's going to be lifted up for Levites and then Nethinims. It's a progressive issue, but it's teaching us that before the ensign is lifted up, the sealing already has to take place. Okay. Well, I'm saying it's in this history here, where the priests are going to be lifted up. They got to be sealed here by the end of day 7. So it's in agreement with this. But these priests here are in a first fruit offering. They stay under the dam for 7 days. Why is that offering under the dam for 7 days? What's a baby cow doing? It's feeding. It's feeding on the food that the mom's given it. Now it's ready to be what? An offering. And the end sign is an offering that's lifted up. It's a wave sheaf offering. First fruits offering is a wave sheaf offering. It's lifted up. Okay, now point of time. I'm saying that at one level, the sealing is a point in time. Prophetically, the seal is put in place at the Sunday law. Now we know that there are waymarks before the Sunday law where the same thing is going to take place in a parallel fashion, I guess you could say that. The work of the, what are you doing, brethren, in the great work of preparation? This is Testimonies, Volume 5, page 216. Those who are united with the world are receiving the worldly mold and preparing for the mark of the beast. Those who are distrustful of self, who are humbling themselves before God and purifying their souls by obeying the truth, these are receiving the heavenly mold and are preparing for the seal of God in their foreheads. When the decree goes forth and the stamp is impressed, their character will remain pure and spotless for eternity. So there is a prophetic level where the sealing takes place at the Sunday law decree, but the sealing is also a period of time. And those people that get the seal at the Sunday law are people that have already settled into the truth, both spiritually and intellectually, so they will not be moved. Okay? So there's two distinctions there, but impressed means imprinted, stamped, marked by pressure, compelled to enter public service, seized for public use, fixed in the mind, made sensible, convinced. Imprinted, stamped. At the Sunday law, their character is imprinted and stamped. But this expression about being impressed or imprinted and stamped, when you get to the reality of those rings that the ancient kings used to have to put their seal into the wax, it was pressed into the wax. It had to stay there for a while the wax cooled, and it could be taken away and the stamp remained after it was removed. It wasn't like you just did it like this, like you would do with an ink stamp. It was impressed into a soft material that was going to be a product. Okay, so there's a period of time. Notice this next quote from Manuscript Releases, Volume 19, page 99. If you would impress upon the wax a clear and vivid impression of the seal, you would not dash the seal upon it in a hasty, violent action, but you would carefully place the seal on the plastic wax and quietly, steadily press it down until it is hardened into the mold. In like manner, deal with human souls. The continuity of Christian influence upon minds trains the soul after Christ and puts in human instrumentalities the new life implanted by the Spirit of God after his own divine likeness. Okay, so the third angel is going to do at least two things. He's going to select the wheat and tares during the time of the judgment. Sin is going to be the issue during that time period. It's going to be one of the arguments. If you can't make a distinction between the precious and the vile, then you've been typified by Aaron's son that used unholy fire. And you're going to be destroyed in the general destruction of the wicked. But another work of the third angel is to seal or bind. In seal or bind, I think you have perfect justification for saying they're just two words saying the same thing. But I think because there's two words, you have the right to make some distinctions about them. And what I'm saying about the sealing, and I'm not trying to answer all the questions about the sealing, is that it's both a period of time and a point in time. You can't separate the two, because even the point in time when the decree is impressed implies that that pressure has been there before it gets removed at the Sunday law where everyone can see it. Follow me? But I want to deal with binding, okay? And say that you can say that it's a seal, but it's also, I'm going to say it's also emphasizing another aspect of what's going on. So I'm on page 12 of your notes, and this is from Experience and Views, page 7. we lived close to my mom and dad for a lot of years when our children were young. And my mother had an aunt. I only met her the one time. She had married someone from Canada. And she hadn't seen this aunt. My mother was old then, and this aunt was way old. And she hadn't seen this aunt for years, but the aunt made a trip down to California and came by her niece's house, my mom. And she did not know that my mother's son and his wife and his children were Seventh-day Adventists, so she didn't mean anything to her. Nobody made any issue. No one challenged her whatsoever about anything that went on. But I'm going to tell you what went on. It just came up, not because of us or because of Adventism. It came up in the discussion between my mother and her aunt that one of her sons or daughters, I forget which, who would be a cousin to my mother in Canada, became a Seventh-day Adventist. And this aunt was real frustrated with Seventh-day Adventists. And she says, "Do you realize that my daughter or my son, whatever it was, her child, that was now a Seventh-day Adventist up in Canada," this aunt is telling my mother, she says, "She actually told me that I was on a train going to hell and that Satan was the conductor of that train." And Kathy and I are hearing this and we're saying, these Seventh-day Adventists, they were just repeating Ellen White. They were just kept out of the conversation. And I just want to tell you that is this quote. "I saw the rapidity with which this delusion was spreading. The train of cars was shown me going with the speed of lightning. The angel bade me look carefully. I fixed my eyes upon the train, seeing that the whole world was on board, that there could not be one left. Said the angel, they are binding in bundles, ready to burn. Then he showed me the conductor, who looked like a stately fair person, which all the passengers looked up to and reverenced. I was perplexed and asked my attending angel who it was. Said he, it is Satan. He is the conductor in the form of an angel of light. He has taken the world captive. They are given over to strong delusion to believe a lie, that they might be damned. This agent, the next highest in order to him, is the engineer, and other of his agents are employed in different offices as he may need them, and they're all going with lightning speed to perdition. They're binding in bundles, ready to burn. I asked the angel if there were none left. He bade me look in the opposite direction, and I saw a little company traveling a narrow pathway. Here's this little company once again. All seem to be firmly united, bound together by the truth in bundles or companies. Maybe you're getting my point now. I'm saying the sealing has to do with marking a character that has been settled on the Lord's side of the question for eternity. That's a sealing. But I'm suggesting the binding is identifying a coming together into an organized company of people. Okay? Because you're getting both here. The world's being bound into bundles heading to perdition, and the true and faithful that are on this path, they're being bound into bundles for the heavenly garment by the truth. All seem to be firmly united and bound together by the truth in bundles or companies, said the angel. The third angel is binding them, sealing them in bundles for the heavenly garner. This little company looked careworn, as though they'd passed through severe trials and conflicts, and it appeared as if the sun had just appeared from behind the cloud and shone upon their countenances and caused them to look triumphant, as though their victories were nearly won. I saw that the Lord had given the world opportunity to discover the snare. This one thing was evidence enough for the Christian that there was no other. There is no difference made between the precious and the vile. The last paragraph is really profound if you wrap your mind around it. It's a short paragraph. I'm going to read it one more time. I saw that the Lord had given the world opportunity to discover the snare. And in the context of this passage, it's saying all the lost, the world. But if you want to bring it down to the priests, it fits there too. I've shown that the Lord gave all the foolish priests opportunity to discover the snare. Okay? This one thing was evidence enough for the Christian if there was no other. what's the one thing that gives you the evidence to see the snare? There is no difference made between the precious and the vile. You aren't sensitive to the sacred and the common, to the precious and the vile, to the wheat and the tares, then you're not recognizing that you're in the snare about to be lost for eternity. Haggai 2:21 to 23. Time check, my brother. 20 minutes. Okay. 12 o'clock. I'm speaking too soft. I'm not sure that I can hear you.
15.
Just cut your time.
Really should be stopping in 4 minutes.
I should be stopping in 4 minutes.
Because of my conversation. No, we need to speak while he's able.
Pardon me?
We need him to speak while he's able because he might skip the rest of the meeting. No, he's not. He's going to do it. He's going to Haggai chapter 2.
This is a big subject, and this is just a minor inference on it. Is that people have rejected this, people that are losing their way, that it's 9/11, the second angel arrived. But it's in the history of the second angel where the sealing is taking place. The sealing takes place in the history of the second angel. If he arrives at 9/11, that's where it's beginning. And when you get into the seven thunders and you see these last 7 kings of Judah, last 7 kings of Israel, based upon the meaning of the names of those kings and the position that they hold, such as Jehoiakim being the first, Jehoiachin being the second, Zedekiah being the third angel's message. You see that Jehoiachin is a symbol of the second angel's message. And it's in this history of the second angel's message where the division between the wheat and tare comes. And the division between the wheat and tares, on one level, it's people that have rejected the love of the truth, that they might be saved. And for this reason, God sends them strong delusion. So in the time period of the second angel, which is represented by Jehoiachin, during the sealing of the 144,000, those that are on the wrong side of the issue are going to receive a message, a counterfeit message of the latter rain. Those that are on the right side of the issue are going to receive the genuine latter rain message. You follow that logic? Okay. So what I'm saying is this sealing is also represented symbolically in the scriptures at a prophetic level. And in Haggai 2, verse 21 through 23, it says, "Speak to Zerubbabel." Let's start in verse 20. And what does Zerubbabel mean? Offspring of Babylon. Zerubbabel becomes a symbol of the second angel's message. And Sister White's clear that the second angel's message that came into history on April 19th, 1844, also comes into history on 9/11. Okay, and the Millerite history is the foundation, and the history of the 144,000 is the capstone. And Zerubbabel becomes a symbol of both the foundational work and the capstone work. He's a symbol of the work of the second angel's message in both those histories. And his name corresponds to the meaning of the second angel, come out of Babylon, offspring of Babylon. So, again, the word of the Lord came unto Haggai in the 4 and 20th day of the month, saying, "Speak to Zerubbabel, governor of Judah, saying, I will shake heavens and earth, and I will overthrow the throne of kingdoms, and I will destroy the strength of the kingdoms of the heaven, and I will overthrow chariots and those that ride in them, and horses and their riders shall come down, everyone by the sword of his brother. In that day, when the final battle between earthly kingdoms and God's kingdom, and who is God's kingdom? 1 Peter chapter 2. It's a kingdom of priests. All right? But In that day, saith the Lord of hosts, will I take thee, O Zerubbabel, my servant, the son of Shealtiel, saith the Lord, and I will make thee as a signet, for I have chosen thee, saith the Lord of hosts. So it's a signet. It's that ring that a king uses to impress the seal. So Zerubbabel, the second angel's message, the message that arrived at 9/11, is the symbol of the sealing of the 144,000, the period of time. Okay, but the scriptures also give us a counterfeit to this. If you go to Jeremiah 22, verse 24, and it's to follow this, you have to read the whole passage in Jeremiah, which we're not going to do. Maybe if I can. Conaniah is another word for Jehoiachin. Not Jehoiakim, not Zedekiah. Jehoiachin, Conaniah are a symbol of the second angel's message. And Jehoiachin is carried into Babylon captive, and he's replaced by Zedekiah. That's the history. He's still living in Babylon. And Jeremiah is prophesying during this time period, and Jeremiah is telling the people in Jerusalem, you need to submit to Babylon because Babylon's going to carry you off into captivity. And they're not listening to him. And there's one point where Jeremiah comes in with a wooden, what do they call it? Yoke. And one of the false prophets named Hananiah opposes his message. And Hananiah gives a false message. He says within 2 years, I think it is 2 years, it might be 1 year, within 2 years, will Jehoiachin come back out of Babylon and be placed up on the throne. So Jehoiachin is a symbol of the second angel's message, and Hananiah, in resisting Jeremiah's message, which is the true message, Hananiah's message, a false prophet, becomes a message of the counterfeit second angel's message in our history. Okay, and Conaniah, Jehoiachin, is a symbol of this counterfeit message. So in verse 24 of Jeremiah 22, it says, as I live, saith the Lord, through Conaniah, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, though Conaniah, that's Jehoiachin, the son of Jehoiakim, king of Judah, were the signet in my right hand, yet would I pluck thee thence, and I will give thee into the hand of them that seek thy life, and into the hand of them that face thou fearest, whose face thou fearest, even into the hand of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, and into the hand of the Chaldeans. Now, my point here is that in the sealing time, the sealing time is the time of the second angel, and if you're on the right side of the issue, there is being a stamp impressed upon your soul. The Sunday law is going to be removed. You're going to remain pure and spotless for eternity. But in that very same time, there is a counterfeit message of the second angel that's been typified by Jehoiachin. The true has been signified by Zerubbabel. Okay, this is a theme in the scriptures, not just in the spirit of prophecy. And in both the story here with Conaniah and Zerubbabel, they are the signet in the Lord's hand. And in Review and Herald, March 19th, 1889, it says, John saw a lamb upon Mount Zion, and with him 144,000 had his father's name written in their foreheads. They bore the signet of heaven. They reflected the image of God. They were full of light and the glory of the Holy One. If we would have the image and superscription of God upon us, we must separate ourselves from all iniquity. We must forsake every evil way, and then we must trust our own cases in the hand of Christ. While we're working out our own salvation with fear and trembling, God will work in us to will and to do it of his own good pleasure. And the next quote from Desire of Ages 392 is dealing with how this separation takes place. And I want us to see it takes place through a message, through words of truth. This is derived from this history. Christ in Capernaum says, whose fan is in his hand, and he will thoroughly purge his floor and gather the wheat into his garner. That's the work of the third angel, right? This was one of the times of purging. By words of truth, the chaff was being separated from the wheat. Because they were too vain and self-righteous to receive reproof, too world-loving to accept a life of humility, many turned away from Jesus. Many are still doing the same thing. Souls are tested today, as were those disciples in the synagogue of Capernaum. When truth is brought home to the heart, they see that their lives are not in accordance with the will of God. They see the need of an entire change in themselves, but they're not willing to take up the self-denying work. Therefore, they are angry when their sins are discovered. They go away offended, even as the disciples left Jesus murmuring, "This is a hard saying, who can hear it?" Okay, so you may wonder why I put these things in place about the 144,000 in the ceiling. In theory, it's to build on them as we proceed into the rest of this study. We're now going to switch gears and go to the connection between the number 8 and the priest. Pardon me. And we timed it just right to end it at the right point in time. And we're going to come back at what time for those people that are watching this on live stream?
At 12 o'clock.
At 12 o'clock, we're going to begin again.
So
So
we sing. Sing at 12 o'clock.
So probably
So-
12:10.
Sing at
So-
12, message at 12.
So let's have a word of prayer. Heavenly Father, we thank you for this Sabbath day. We thank you for the wonderful truths that you've opened up to your people here at the end of the world. But we understand these truths are bringing a serious message to each of us to internalize. That those that receive the seal of God are those people that are so sensitive to sin that they cannot allow it to exist in their own experience, and they cannot be silent when they see it happening around themselves. We want this experience. We want to be those that are bound in bundles for the heavenly garner. And we ask that the work that you're doing here this Sabbath day among us would be part of that celebrating the truth that we all need so very dearly. We thank you for these things in Jesus' name. So when we come back there, someone will give an opening prayer, and then, because it is the worship hour, then I will come up and have a silent prayer.